Hello, and welcome to the Cultivating Calmness podcast. Today, I brought a couple of my little plant friends along to talk about plants in therapy. How are they the same, and maybe how are they a little different? And, just to kind of exploring that. Now, if you have been following me or watching me at all very much, you know that I really do enjoy plants and plant care. And I guess I kind of fell into that, at least in the office space. I worked in places where I wasn't allowed to have real live plants, which didn't make sense to me. It was an allergy issue. Even though they could have plants in the main office spaces, but not in my office. But that's beside the point. So I was not have a plant. So when I got my own office, that was one of the things I wanted. And I had lots of windows. I was on a corner. So I had windows over here and windows over here. And when I first got in there and I kind of had a little open house, and actually my husband was in there making it all nice and finishing it up. And so there were just a couple of plants in there, and a couple of friends and family brought me some plants to put in there. And so I had maybe 5 plants to start off with, but in some of my free time and other times I would just, go off to the store and I'd get a plant here and get a plant there. And I tended to buy the free plant, or not free plants, the discounted plants who maybe looked like they were struggling a little bit. And some of those have been very successful and some of those have not. And I've also propagated a bunch of plants. So I think this is a pothos, and most of my pothos have been propagated, meaning we cut little portions of them and stuck them in water, and then they grew roots, and then I would plant them and get more plants. So I have only purchased the different kind of pothos, the ones that are differently colored, or not kind of the standard ones. This is a pretty standard pothos that you might find at the Home Depot or something like that. And anyway, my collection is built over time, and with my collection I have learned how plants grow better. And I have gotten better at taking care of them. So when people come into my office and they see all the plants, they're like, "Whoa, you have a green thumb." And I'm like, "Yeah, I guess." But I've also learned how to do it over time. I've learned maybe what works and what doesn't. And I'm still learning. There's still things where I'm like, I don't know why that's happening. And good thing for resources and plant groups and planty people, where I will learn more and learn that, maybe what I've been doing isn't exactly the right way. Or I've also seen where planty people are like, "Oh, absolutely don't do that." And I'm like, well, I do that and it's kind of been fine for me. So that happens in life too. So I brought a couple of these plants, and I didn't, I could have brought a bunch, but I started with just 2. I have a pothos here, and this is a peace lily, and they both can be very temperamental. So when it comes to therapy can be kind of temperamental. Every client is different, just like every plant is different. And every client has their own needs. Every plant has their own needs. And when we explore plant care, it's very similar to the way we care for our patients, and we care for people, human beings. We're all different. And so even though maybe they say you should treat a certain condition in this way, it may be different for this person because they have other extenuating circumstances, or they have other things going on, which maybe makes their care slightly different than somebody else's care who follows traditional expectations and rules. So I hope that makes sense. So I brought these because they're temperamental. And so this one has recently been watered. I'm touching the top of the soil, and the very top is feeling dry. But if I even just go down a little bit, it is wet. And so we are going to be heading into a weekend. So for me, when I head into a weekend, I guess I will water a lot of my pothos and some of those plants that are temperamental, because in the winter I guess it really depends. My air seems kind of dry in my office, so I'm still watering fairly regularly, whereas people that maybe have more greenhouse effect type things going on for their spaces may have more humidity and their plants may dry out a lot less. And then let's see. So they may dry out a lot less, so they don't have to water as often. I tend to still water my plants like once a week. And if I'm going to have more than 2 days at home, or like not going to be in the office for 3 days or 4 days, then I may water extra, even if they're already a little damp, because more often than not, by the time I get back in, this and this one over here are going to be droopy. Like these will all like be drooping down. You know, they may be kind of turned over where the leaves aren't turned up, but they're turned like down. It'll just look very unwell is what will happen with this one. And I'll be able to tell like, oh, it needs water. Another thing about this one is that I have lots of pothos around the office because I like the droopy, drapey plants. I think it's just awesome. So the more they droopy, drapey, the more I like them, and they can droopy, drapey all over my office. And I have some pretty long ones. But what can happen is, see, this is a pot inside of a pot. And don't know if you can see this. There are a few roots coming down from the bottom of this inner pot here. So I'm not going to pull it out here right now, but one of the things that may happen with this is that if I were to try to pull it out, probably unlikely at this point, but there may be roots like kind of wrapping around, and it may be getting what they call root bound. And we don't want that to happen. Now, this is a pot that doesn't have a hole in the bottom because I have this. If I would just put this plant directly into this pot, we would want the bottom to have holes in it so that the water can escape, because that would cause another problem, is that the water doesn't escape. It just sits there, and those roots can become like what they call root rot, like they've sat in water too much, and they can start to go bad basically, and you'll see it in the leaves. Sometimes that means the leaves start to like turn brown, or they will like yellow and start to fall off. So that's also another thing. If I have been gone and they haven't been watered, sometimes I'll start to see yellow leaves. And that's a sign like they haven't been getting enough of what they want. Another sign, when I have a plant that the leaves are falling off and I'm like watering it, I'm checking it, my next guess is that it's probably root bound, or there's something going on with the roots. I have one of those happening in my main lobby area right now, and I've already separated this plant. It was bigger and bushier, and I did like a half a transplant. It looked like it was a couple bound groups of pothos in one. So I took like half and I tried to, separate as best I could, and I put the other half in a pot, and I left that half in that pot to continue growing. And it was doing well until, the last couple weeks I've been seeing a lot of yellowing leaves. And at first I thought maybe I watered it too much. I let it kind of sit there. I'm still losing leaves. So my really long trailing trail is now like a bunch of its leaves are gone. So that's disappointing because I wanted to have leaves. So I may have to like just snip that, propagate what I can, and allow another long section to grow over there. I haven't quite figured it out. So that's, what happens, with clients as well. And I took this out. And so now I am wanting it to be sitting around the face a little better. When I think about plants and clients, sometimes we will water, right? And it fluffs somebody back up. So that may be, we do a certain type of treatment. We talk about something specific and it is releasing, it's healing. Sometimes we'll talk about something and we'll do some work and it'll be like droopy. Maybe it's too much. Excuse me. So we see that sometimes with maybe trauma treatment or like EMDR, where maybe we've opened a floodgate, we've opened a door that they weren't quite prepared to open and deal with. And that's where, like with plants, maybe we've overwatered or we've undercared. We haven't given it the support that it needs. So that's that coping skills. So in theory, if we have prepared a client well and they have the coping strategies and lots of them, then when we get to those hard things and that door has been opened and some of that stuff starts to come out, they have the coping strategies to be able to deal with it, even though those things are coming up. That would be like soil. That these plants are in. If you don't have the right soil for some plants, and that's something I'm still learning with the plant world, if you don't have the right kind of soil mixture, then the plant is going to suffer pretty much like no matter what, because there's something about like how much air is able to get into it, how much water is able to be retained, and held on to, which will determine how often you water or don't water, etc. And so there's different soil mixes and different things you can add to the soil, and that will all help the plant. I didn't bring one in here with me today, but even like well, this is like a trailing plant, but a climbing plant, ones that need, maybe sticks in them, or those moss poles. If you don't have like a moss pole or something for it to climb up, it's going to droop, it'll get heavy, and it doesn't have that support that it really needs. And even when it does have a moss pole, sometimes you need to have things or clips or ties to hold the plant to the moss pole until those roots that kind of grow out of it start to like grow into and around the pole that you've given it for support. I have some of those in my office. I have some that are okay, and some where I'm like, well, you really need a taller pole, something taller, because the plant has gone, above that, but I don't have that, so I make do with what I have. Or I will cut the plant so that it stays within the pole, and I will propagate and then maybe add one of the props to the bottom so it's a fuller plant, or I will just create other little plants from that. So when it comes to therapy, it's similar. We're looking at, what your supports are, what you have, and what you may need to alter versus what other people may need to alter to support you. And both can happen in therapy, but ultimately we look a lot at, what you need and what we can do to help you get the things that you need. So we talk a lot about boundaries. A plant is contained to its container. So we saw those roots coming out. I don't know if I can find the picture, but I had a pothos in a not a terracotta, one of those planters that comes from actually I think this one came from maybe New Mexico or Arizona, and it's painted really cool. Sometimes you can find them in local stores that sell that type of like pottery. It did, I believe, have a drainage hole in the bottom. Now I can't remember. Maybe it doesn't have a drainage hole. It should have had a drainage hole, because I just put some dirt in there, put the pothos in there, and it had been there for a couple of years. It was doing well. And then the leaves started to die, and I'm watering it, and like it's dry, and I'm like, what's going on? Maybe we've got some root rot. No, we didn't have root rot. I went to take the plant out, and I could not get it out of the plant, the pot. The pot was it was a boot. It was about like this big, and it was like a cowboy boot. So it went down and got really thin in the bottom, but the bottom was still like a boot, and it was still open, like you could get soil in there. The entire bottom of the boot, the entire bottom and up into like most of it, like there was hardly any dirt left in this. I don't know how that works. I don't know where the dirt went, because it was dirt. So it must have just been coming out over time. And I kept like sweeping it up and not really paying attention or noticing that was happening. So again, like the plants are doing things that compares to life. Like if we're not paying attention to the symptoms, the dirt's pushing out, the dirt's pushing out, the dirt's pushing out, and I'm constantly cleaning up the dirt, right? That's like you having these symptoms. I'm irritable, I'm moody, I'm snappy, I'm this, I'm that, like I'm not sleeping well, right? Are we paying attention to those things? And what's that underlying issue? Well, the underlying issue here was that the roots were so packed in there, it had nowhere else to go. And so the leaves finally started turning, like, hey, whoa, warning sign. Yeah, this is what's going on. Help me. I had to basically cut off all the roots. And now I can't remember. Actually, I can't remember which plant, like which pot I moved it into. it may be this one. So it's doing really well if it is. It may be a different one, but it's doing well because once you moved it, it was like, right? It had space, it had air. The container it was in, it outgrew its container. So sometimes the boundaries we set, we outgrow them. Sometimes we outgrow the skills that we have, or we needed certain skills. We needed certain things to help us, and we outgrow it. We don't need it anymore because we've improved, or the people around us have improved, or the circumstances have improved, and therefore the things we had in place no longer work for us. That container no longer worked for the plant. So I had to kind of rip it out. It cut up the roots. I had to put it in new soil. I gave it some fertilizer to help it like kind of acclimate and hopefully not kill off the rest of the plant. And, I think it did well. And then I had to dig out the rest of the roots that were in there. That was hard because I couldn't get my hand in it. And so I was using like a pen, and I'm using like things to try to dig out the roots in there so I could get something else in there, which I did. I did put another plant that isn't as rooty, not a pothos, but a different plant I put in there, and so far it's doing well. But now I know to keep an eye out for that and take note that we need to be checking the roots on this plant every so often to make sure that it's not becoming root bound, or pick and choose what plants you're putting where. Some plants you think maybe they want a bigger pot because they're getting bigger and bigger, but they tend to like more of that root boundy type of situation, right? It's comfortable. It doesn't affect them as much. And then when you put them into a bigger plant, a bigger planter, then it's too much space and they die. So I've done that before where I thought, oh, this needs a bigger pot. So I put it into a bigger pot. Nope, that didn't work. It immediately started to die. And by that time it was too late. I was like, well, noted. Next time I won't do that. Sometimes we do those things. Sometimes we try different skills. Sometimes we'll go into something with a client, whether it's EMDR or some other modality, and we'll realize, oh, that doesn't quite work. I've definitely been there. We've, done all the prep stuff and things seemed okay. And then we'd start and it was like, okay, all right, not going where I thought this would go. We're not having the movement I thought I would have. So we need to, we need to push pause on that and maybe come back around to this later, explore some other options and see what's going to work best. So a lot of like human care is knowing the signs and symptoms. A lot of plant care is knowing the signs and symptoms. How do we care for it? How much water does it need? What kind of soil does it need? What kind of lighting does it need? So that's another thing too, that certain plants will look a certain way when they have enough light. I actually learned something new the other day. It was plants that are it's called variegated. I don't think this is a variegated plant. It's where their like other colors start to work into the plant that's maybe it's not naturally there, or maybe it's just an all green leaf. Some variegated will have some like different colors maybe working its way in, and I guess what I learned was that variegation can start to disappear when the plant does not have enough light. So if it's not in the right kind of lighting, that cool aspect, like people will pay extra for a variegated plant. When it doesn't have the right kind of lighting, I guess, that variegation can retract and kind of go back and disappear. And I would assume maybe the same can happen with maybe too much light. If it gets too much light, maybe it can lose variegation. I don't know that for certain, but maybe you know something I don't know, and you can let me know. So I love talking about plants and how they relate to human care because they are so related. And you've probably seen that thing. It's gone around the internet. I haven't personally done the experiment myself, but the idea is like when you talk nicely to plants, like if I had a plant in one room and I talked nicely to it, and I had the same plant and under the same circumstances and I talked mean to it, I said nasty things to it and I called it names and hurtful things, it would the one that you talk mean to will start to die and wither and not be doing well, whereas the one you're talking nice to will do well and will grow and prosper. And so I've seen this experiment done, in like video form and people educating. I have not personally done it myself, but I could really see how that would, how that could be true. But it's also true for us, right? If we talk negatively to ourselves, we're going to feel bad. If we talk negatively to the people around us, they're going to feel bad. They're going to behave badly. And I am not perfect by any means, but it is something that is a hard habit to break. So if you are somebody that struggles with that, we talk about that, like that means something. Negative self-talk, those automatic negative thoughts, some people call them ants, automatic negative thoughts, you bring you down. So it's where like gratitude is usually like we used to maybe counteract those negative thoughts, to think about like, what are the positives in this situation? I like to say that in most situations, even though really negative, we could probably find some kind of positive out of it. I even use like when somebody we love dies, right? Yes, very tragic and very sad. But there's probably some good experience that is coming from that. Maybe it's like seeing people you haven't seen in a while at the funeral. Maybe it's recognizing how loved your person was by other people. Or maybe it's seeing how some of the good things that this person did and the effect that they had on other people's lives that you maybe hadn't noticed. Or, maybe there was a stressful situation that is now over because of this loss. It doesn't matter, what it is. There's probably a smidge or something good that can come out of even a bad experience. And that happens with everything, right? Just because you have a bad morning doesn't mean you have to have a bad evening, but it can be that way if you allow your thoughts to ruminate on the bad morning you had and the bad incident, and like, that happened and this person, and it just carries on and on and on and on. I've seen it happen with me. I use personal examples with my clients where I can, show them how this worked and how it happened with me. And so like I know that it works. I know that that has an effect. So when I tell people like these things work, like it's not just because some book said it or because other people said it. It's because, I've experienced it. I've witnessed it, whether it's witnessing it in my clients or witnessing it in myself. And the same with like plants and plant care, right? If we give them attention. Now I have, I don't know, like 70 or so plants in my office, like just my office. Maybe it's not quite that many. That's a lot. Let's just say it's a lot. And we talk about stuff in my office, right? There's people talking about not great stuff, traumas, difficulties, but we're also having growth. And I like to think that the plants are listening, the plants hear them, and they're giving their feedback. They're giving us more oxygen and a healthier environment to be able to process all that difficulty and all that yuck. And, for the most part, they're doing well. And so if I'm caring for them, and if you're caring for your needs and your body and you're getting the treatment that you need, you're going to thrive and flourish just like these plant babies here. This one is really temperamental. She is, like I said, a peace lily, and she will like be really droopy. So if I didn't water her, and let's say I was gone for a week or something and I didn't water her, she'd be like all drooped over. So I'll come in and give her a healthy filling of water, and then sometimes not quite by the end of the day, but definitely by the next day, she's perked back up and doing so much better. And the same can happen for you if you give yourself time. If you give yourself the things that you need, if you're filling your cup, right? I always tell my clients, and I have to remind myself sometimes, that if you're not filling your cup, you can't pour from an empty cup. So I have a lot of people that are like they like to be givers and doers and help other people. And that's great. And I want you to do that. And it's very hard to do those things that you enjoy doing if you're running on empty all the time. And it doesn't mean I have to go spend a bunch of money on myself. It can, if you're able to do that, and that is something that is feasible for you, and going and spending money on things that help you, great. Not everybody can do that. Maybe it's just having time on your own, reading a book instead of scrolling on social media. Maybe it's going for a walk. The other day, I needed to leave the house. I just needed to leave the house and get out. And I went to a couple of stores. I looked around. I had a gift card. I found something for me and I bought it. I ended up buying a book, and then I spent the rest of the evening way too late reading and finishing said book. So, I really enjoyed that. That really filled my cup. Now, the staying up too late did not. That also partially drained my cup, but we'll just pretend that didn't happen. So, do what I say, not what I do all the time. I can make mistakes too, but sometimes like plant care in the summer, I'm out in the garden and I'm barefoot and I'm doing things, and yes, it has its own form of like stress with that. It's hot and like my back will hurt and stuff, but like it feels good to also be outside and to get that stuff done, and to feel accomplished. So you need to be able to do those things for you too, even if it's just getting a cup of coffee before you go to the office or with a friend. It could be an hour. It doesn't have to be all day. Sometimes we get in our heads that, oh, I can't do that. I don't have enough time. Maybe it's making a phone call to and from work. So that's going to fill your cup. You're going to feel that connection with other people when you maybe make that effort and making the time to do that. We think, oh, well, I'm really busy. I never have time to call them. I'm like, well, how long is your commute, to and from the office, even if it's 5 minutes, right? But, 20 minutes. Okay. Well, do you think you may have time to call your friend or your aunt or your cousin or, whoever that is that you're missing out on, and give them a call and just talk for those 20 minutes? It doesn't have to be every day either. Maybe it's the first Monday of every month. I make time to call this person, right? Maybe it's a weekly date, right? Mondays at 5 o'clock on my way home, I call Joe and we talk to Joe, and you would just make sure I make it a regular thing because I maybe want that connection, and that connection is going to fill me up. And then I'm not, scrolling or listening to stuff that maybe I don't need. That's just one suggestion or a few different suggestions of things that you could do. So filling your cup is like getting the things that you need. That's sustenance, right? We give plants like fertilizer and light and water. You need those things too. You need water, you need fertilizer or food, you need light, you need sunlight. Like those are physically things you need. You also need time, you need sleep, you need energy. And if you're not giving yourself those things, you're going to droop and you're not going to be doing well, and you're going to show those symptoms of stress and distress. So I could probably talk forever in lots of different ways, and I'm sure I'm going to come up with something as soon as I'm done. Another way I could relate plants back to, human care, but I think you get the gist. So I appreciate you joining me today. Thank you, and I will see you again next week.